I had just taken a sip of my morning coffee when the most ear-piercing scream I had ever heard in my life ripped through the air. It was the kind of scream that made your stomach drop, the kind you'd expect from a horror movie victim right before the axe fell. I bolted from my chair, nearly choking on my drink, my heart hammering as I rushed outside. And there she was, Karen Willoughby, my nightmare of a neighbor, flailing on the ground as if she had been struck by lightning. Her face was twisted in pure horror, her arms flapping wildly. It took me a moment to realize what had happened. The fence. The electrified fence. I had set it up just last night. And Karen? Well, she had just learned about it the hard way. 2 weeks ago, if you had told me I'd be electrocuting my neighbor, accidentally, of course, I would have laughed and called you crazy. But then again, 2 weeks ago, I was still under the naive assumption that Karen was just an annoying neighbor, not a full-fledged lunatic. She had been trespassing on my land for months, treating my farm like her personal backyard, completely ignoring every warning, every request, every attempt at reasoning. But this was the final straw. The first time I caught Karen on my property, I thought it was a harmless mistake. It was a warm summer afternoon, and I was checking my crops when I spotted her on the other side of the field, casually plucking tomatoes from my garden like she was at a grocery store. I watched in stunned silence as she examined each one, tossed a few aside like they weren't up to her standards, and then stuffed the rest into a tote bag slung over her shoulder. Can I help you?" I called out, still processing the audacity of what I was witnessing. She turned to me, unfazed, flashing one of those insincere smiles people give when they're caught doing something they know they shouldn't be doing. "Oh, Jake. You don't mind, do you? These tomatoes just look too good to pass up." I blinked. "Yeah, actually, I do mind. That's called stealing." Karen let out a dramatic gasp, clutching her chest like I had accused her of arson instead of taking a few tomatoes. "Stealing? Oh, don't be ridiculous. This land used to belong to my great-great-uncle's cousin's friend's stepbrother or something like that. Technically, I have every right to be here." I stared at her, waiting for the punchline. Surely, this was some kind of joke. But no, she was dead serious. And that was just the beginning. Over the next few weeks, Karen's visits became more frequent. At first, it was little things, walking her dog across my property, clipping a few flowers, claiming she was just enjoying nature. Then, it escalated. One morning, I caught her exercising in my barn. She had laid out a yoga mat, put on some calming meditation music, and was in the middle of a downward dog when I walked in. "Karen, what the hell are you doing?" She straightened up, wiped imaginary sweat from her forehead, and grinned. "Oh, Jake, I've been meaning to talk to you about this. Your barn has the perfect ambience for my morning yoga routine. It's so rustic and peaceful." I rubbed my temples, trying to summon the patience of a saint. "This is my barn. My private property. You can't just waltz in here whenever you feel like it." She huffed, rolling up her mat with a dramatic flair. "Wow. You don't have to be so territorial, you know. Sharing is caring." I should have called the cops right then and there, but part of me still thought she'd get the message eventually. Oh, how wrong I was. The final breaking point came a week later. I woke up to the sound of laughter and clinking glasses outside my window. Confused, I threw on my boots and headed toward the noise, only to be greeted by the sight of 6 women sitting in a circle in the middle of my field, sipping wine and munching on cheese platters like they were at a vineyard retreat. "Karen!" I barked, barely holding back my rage. She beamed up at me, completely unfazed. "Oh, Jake. Perfect timing. Want to join us? We're discussing our latest book club pick." My eye twitched. "This is my farm. You're stomping all over my crops." She waved a dismissive hand. "Oh, don't be so dramatic. It's just a few plants. Besides, fresh air is good for the soul." That was it. That was the moment I knew talking wasn't going to work. Reasoning with Karen was like trying to negotiate with a raccoon that had already decided to rummage through your trash. It was useless. She wasn't going to stop. Not unless I made her. That night, I sat down at my kitchen table, stewing in frustration. I needed a solution. A legal one. Something that would send a message without getting me arrested. That's when the idea hit me. An electric fence. I spent the next 2 days installing it. Not something dangerous, just a low-voltage shock, enough to make anyone who touched it very uncomfortable but not enough to cause real harm. I even put up warning signs, big ones, in bright red letters. Private property. Electric fence. No trespassing. But Karen? She ignored them. Of course she did. And that led us to this moment. There she was, on the ground, clutching her arm, her face twisted in rage and humiliation. You electrocuted me, she screeched. I crossed my arms, raising an eyebrow. No, Karen. You electrocuted yourself. You ignored the giant warning signs and decided to touch the fence anyway. She struggled to her feet, huffing and puffing like a furious bulldog. This is illegal. You monster. I could have died. I sighed. It's a legal fence, Karen. I checked. It's even at the lowest voltage setting. Maybe next time, you'll respect property boundaries. Her eyes narrowed, and I could see the wheels turning in her head. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. She pointed a shaking finger at me. Oh, you'll regret this, Jake Turner. You'll regret this. And with that, she stomped off, muttering under her breath. I watched her go, shaking my head. I should have felt victorious. I should have felt relieved. But deep down, I knew one thing for sure. Karen wasn't the type to back down easily. This was just the beginning. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of my phone vibrating aggressively on the nightstand. Groaning, I reached for it, squinting at the bright screen. It was a notification from the local neighborhood Facebook group. My gut already told me what I was about to see before I even opened it. Sure enough, there it was. A post from Karen Willoughby, written in all caps, dripping with self-righteous fury. Attention neighbors! Beware of the dangerous man living next door to me. This monster installed an illegal electrified fence and tried to kill me. I was shocked so badly I could have gone into cardiac arrest. Is this what our neighborhood has come to? Please, share this post and let's make sure this menace pays for what he did. I stared at my phone, blinking in disbelief. She had really gone all out. I scrolled through the comments, shaking my head. Some of them were exactly what I expected. OMG, Karen, are you okay? That's horrible. How can people be so cruel? He should be arrested. But then, thankfully, there were a few sane voices mixed in. Wait, isn't this the same Karen who got banned from the farmer's market for stealing eggs? I live down the road from Jake. His fence has clear warning signs. Maybe don't go where you're not supposed to. Karen, didn't you trespass on his land like multiple times? I remember you posting about how nature should belong to everyone a few weeks ago. I let out a low chuckle. The neighborhood wasn't completely buying her nonsense. That was a small victory. But I knew this wasn't over. Karen wasn't just trying to ruin my reputation. She wanted revenge. I spent the rest of the morning on edge, waiting for her next move. She didn't keep me waiting long. Around noon, I heard a knock at my door. Fast, angry, and impatient. When I opened it, there she stood, dressed in her best, angry suburban mom outfit, holding a manila envelope like it was a weapon. You have one chance to take down that fence before I escalate this, she snapped, shoving the envelope toward me. I glanced at it and sighed. Let me guess. A lawsuit. Her lips curled into a smug smirk. That's right. You can either take the fence down now, or my lawyer will make sure you regret it. I took the envelope, opened it, and immediately started laughing. It was the most laughable, amateurishly written legal document I had ever seen. The formatting was off, there were typos everywhere, and at the bottom, instead of an attorney's signature, there was just her own. Karen, you printed this off the internet, didn't you? Her face turned an impressive shade of red. That's not the point. The point is, you have put my life in danger, and if you don't take that fence down, I will bring the full weight of the law upon you." I leaned against the doorframe, crossing my arms. "Karen, did you even bother to check if my fence is legal before making a scene?" She scoffed. "Legal? Please. No way something that dangerous is allowed." I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my saved documents, opening the county property regulations I had checked before installing the fence. Then I turned the screen toward her. "Read it and weep. Low-voltage electric fences are perfectly legal on private farmland as long as they have proper warning signs. Which mine does." She opened her mouth, closed it, then opened it again. Finally, she shrieked, spun on her heel, and stormed away. I knew she wasn't done. If anything, this just made her more determined. That was confirmed when, a few hours later, I got another notification from Facebook. This time, Karen had upgraded her tactics. Not only had she created a new post, but she had somehow gathered a small group of like-minded individuals, fellow Karens by the look of it, to protest in front of my farm. I stepped onto my porch and nearly lost it when I saw the scene unfolding. There were about 5 of them, standing at the edge of my property, holding homemade signs with some of the most ridiculous slogans I had ever seen. Farms should be free. No more electric violence. Stop the shocking oppression. One woman was even chanting, "We demand tomato justice," over and over again. I ran a hand down my face, exhaling slowly. This was beyond absurd. I considered going over and telling them to leave, but honestly, the sight was too hilarious. Instead, I pulled up a chair, grabbed a beer, and just watched. The protest didn't last long. Within an hour, most of them got bored and left. Karen, however, stood her ground, glaring at me with enough hatred to set the whole field on fire. Finally, she stomped away, but not before pointing at me and yelling, "This isn't over." She was right, because later that night I heard something moving near the fence. At first, I thought it was an animal, maybe a raccoon or a coyote. But then I saw a shadowy figure creeping along the edge of the property, right where the fence was. I watched from my window, my breath slow and steady. The figure was clearly trying to be sneaky, but they were doing a terrible job at it. They stumbled, muttered something under their breath, then pulled something from their pocket. A flashlight beam flickered on, illuminating their face for just a second. It was Karen. I had to bite the inside of my cheek to keep from laughing. What was she even doing? Trying to disable the fence? Cut it? I grabbed my phone and pulled up the security camera feed. Sure enough, the footage was capturing every ridiculous moment. I hit record, making sure to save this for later. Karen pulled out what looked like a pair of gardening gloves, took a deep breath, and reached for the fence. Zap! A muffled yelp filled the night air. She yanked her hand back, shaking it wildly. Then she tried again. Zap! Another yelp, this one louder. I watched, fascinated, as she stood there, hopping in place, muttering what I could only assume were curses under her breath. She tried one more time, this time using a stick to push at the wires. The stick slipped, and before she could react, she lost her balance and fell face-first into a muddy puddle. That was it. I couldn't hold it in anymore. I burst out laughing, loud enough for her to hear. She froze, slowly turning her head toward my house. Even from a distance, I could see the absolute rage in her eyes. "You," she started, but I cut her off. "Karen, do you ever learn?" She scrambled to her feet, covered in mud, shaking with fury. "You think this is funny? You think you can just get away with electrocuting people? Well, considering you keep electrocuting yourself, yeah, kinda." She let out a strangled scream and stormed off, her shoes making horrible squelching noises with every step. I watched her go, still chuckling. I had a feeling the next day was going to be very interesting. The next morning, I was greeted by the sound of knocking on my front door. Not just any knocking, angry knocking. The kind that promised drama, threats, and a whole lot of unnecessary yelling. I took my time getting there, sipping my coffee as I prepared for what I was about to deal with. When I finally swung the door open, I wasn't surprised in the slightest to see Karen standing there, her arms crossed, her face still streaked with dried mud from last night's fence fiasco. Behind her stood 2 uniformed police officers. I had expected her to escalate things, but even this was impressive. She pointed a triumphant finger at me. "Arrest him," she screeched. He installed a torture device on his fence. I was attacked, assaulted, brutalized. "Look at my hands." She shoved her palms toward the officers, who both leaned back slightly as if they could already sense the level of crazy they were dealing with. One of the officers, a middle-aged guy with a tired expression that told me he had seen far worse in his career, cleared his throat. "Sir, we received a complaint about an illegal electric fence on your property." I nodded, completely calm. "I figured you would. Karen here has been trespassing on my farm for weeks. The fence is perfectly legal, officer. I checked all county regulations before installing it, and I made sure to put up multiple warning signs." Karen's jaw nearly hit the ground. "Lies. He is lying." The second officer, a younger woman who looked like she was desperately holding back an eye roll, sighed. "Ma'am, we'll have to confirm that ourselves." "Go ahead," I said, stepping aside. "Feel free to take a look." I watched as the officers walked toward the fence, carefully reading the very obvious red warning signs before testing the voltage with their equipment. They exchanged glances before walking back over to us. The male officer turned to Karen, his expression unreadable. "Ma'am, the fence is completely legal. It's at the lowest voltage allowed by the county, and the warning signs are clearly visible. There's no crime here." Karen's face twisted into a mix of rage and disbelief. "No crime? Are you joking? I was electrocuted. Twice. What kind of world do we live in where people can just put up deadly fences and zap innocent women?" The female officer let out a deep sigh, clearly at the end of her patience. "Ma'am, you were electrocuted because you trespassed on private property. If you had respected the no trespassing signs, none of this would have happened." Karen's eyes went wild. "So you're just going to let him get away with attempted murder?" Both officers gave her the same exhausted look. The male officer pulled out a small notepad and started writing. "Actually, ma'am, since we're here, we need to address something else." She blinked. "Excuse me. You admitted to trespassing. Multiple times. And based on the security footage Mr. Turner provided." He lifted his phone, showing the recording of her sneaking onto my land in the dead of night. "We have enough evidence to issue you a citation for trespassing and attempting to tamper with private property." Karen made a sound that could only be described as a strangled chicken noise. You're fining me?" The female officer ripped the ticket off her notepad and handed it to her. "You're lucky it's just a fine. If Mr. Turner wanted to press charges, this could be a much bigger issue." Karen was trembling with anger. Her hands clenched the ticket so tightly I thought she might rip it in half. Then, without another word, she screeched at the top of her lungs and stomped away, kicking up dust as she disappeared down the road. The officers gave me a small nod before leaving, and as soon as they were gone, I burst out laughing. I thought that would be the end of it. I should have known better. 2 days passed with no sign of Karen. No random appearances on my land, no passive-aggressive Facebook posts, no nonsense protests at my fence. At first, I enjoyed the peace, but by the 3rd day, a small part of me started to feel uneasy. Karen never gave up this easily. That night, I sat on my porch, watching the fence line, waiting. It was too quiet. Even the usual crickets seemed to sense something was coming. Then, at around midnight, I heard it. Rustling. I didn't even have to check my cameras to know what was happening. I grabbed my flashlight and made my way to the edge of my property, stepping carefully through the dark. When I reached the fence, I saw her. Karen. This time, she wasn't alone. A man, probably her husband, stood beside her, holding a bolt cutter. I stared for a moment, letting the absurdity of the situation sink in. Was she really trying to destroy my fence? She saw me and immediately shrieked, pointing. "You! This is all your fault. Her husband looked at her, then at me, clearly questioning every life choice that had led him to this moment. I crossed my arms. Karen, you do realize I have cameras, right? You're literally committing a crime right now. Karen ignored me and turned to her husband. Cut it. Cut the fence. The man hesitated. Karen, maybe this isn't a good idea. Do it. The moment he touched the fence with the metal cutters, the inevitable happened. Zap! The loudest yelp of pain echoed through the night as both of them tumbled backward, landing in a very familiar puddle of mud. I sighed. You know, at some point, you'd think you'd learn. Karen let out a frustrated scream, scrambling to her feet. She turned, covered head to toe in mud, hair sticking out like a cartoon villain. You win this time, Jake Turner, but this isn't over. Her husband groaned, still lying in the mud. Karen, I think we should move. I almost felt bad for the guy. The next morning, I woke up to an empty, Karen-free world. No protests, no Facebook drama, no unwanted farm yoga sessions. Later that evening, I got the best news I had heard all month. Karen had finally sold her house and moved away. I should have celebrated. I should have thrown a party. But as I sat on my porch, enjoying the peaceful silence, something strange happened. A moving truck pulled up next door. A new neighbor stepped out. She looked around, hands on her hips, then spotted me. She grinned and called out, "Hey there, neighbor. Wow, what a gorgeous farm. You don't mind if I take a stroll through your fields, do you?" I set down my drink, staring into the distance like a war veteran who just realized the battle wasn't over. Somewhere, in the universe, the cycle of Karens was eternal. I exhaled deeply and muttered to myself, time to upgrade the fence.